LaToya Days, Instructional Program Support for the Southeast Region Exceptional Education Student Services Department. I am here to present with my colleagues, Lynn Patty and Dr. Beverly McGuire.
Hi, I'm Beverly McGuire, and I'm also Instructional Program Support with the Southeast team.
Hey everybody, I'm Lynn Patty, also Instructional Program Support with the Southeast team. Today we're going to share some things with you. We usually like to share things to do. Today we are going to share some things that we would like to ask you to avoid doing. Building relationships means working on building skills that when the kids are upset or they have a problem, they come to us with their problems. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today are coercive, and they are things that do not build relationships. They break trust. They can make the kids want to get even with you or retaliate against you, and it's just things that would break trust.
When you do these things, if you go into a classroom and you like, I'm going to give an example of telling on kids. If you are in a classroom and the teacher will say, oh, guess what so-and-so did in the hall to somebody else, you'll notice that some of those students actually model that behavior. So they do model the behavior that they see in the class, and that's why these are good things to attempt to avoid.
That is a good point. So here's the things to strive to avoid.
Arguing is when you're attempting to get someone to agree with you, or you're objecting to a statement that another person has made. And we want to avoid arguing with students because that it's opposite of building relationships. I attended a training by Jessica Minahan, and she made a statement that just summed it all up. If one will not, two cannot. And two cannot argue. And always remain the adult in the situation. When you're arguing back and forth with a student, you have lost your power. You are no longer an adult in the situation. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
I taught at DuPont for kids that were labeled severely emotionally disturbed, and I had a young lady that I felt like I argued with all the time. I remember thinking, that's all I do is argue. And that was either my first or second year, I can't remember, but it didn't take me long to realize that I couldn't argue with her if I just allowed her to have the last word, walk away. Even if she is cussing at me under her breath, I would just walk away, because we can't win an argument with students.
Questioning. If you are questioning a student, if you just see them pick something up and put it in their pocket, and you go, did you just put that in your pocket? And you know what the answer is. But if you ask that may be when the child says, no, I didn't. So if there's no reason to ask a question, don't do it. Because if you know the answer, there's no point in asking the question. And sometimes asking questions, there is no good answer to. Mm-hmm. So it's best to avoid using questioning. Lynn or LaToya, anything you'd like to add?
Well, especially if you know the child did something, if they took something, put it in their pocket, and you say, did you take that? So that is going to lead to that student lying or, just deferring whatever he's going to say, or getting angry or upset at that point. So if we know the answer, we need to just direct them back to what we want them to do. Using force is something that we really should avoid. So force can be used either verbally, or it can be physical force, where we take a student's arm to lead them to the cafeteria or to get them away from the bathroom quicker. Using force is not a good way to model what we want our students to do. We don't want our students using force with their friends or their people who are just any peer.
And I agree with that, Lynn, and I know that sometimes it's like you can be doing something and an adult will use force with you on another adult, and it's uncomfortable if somebody says, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So can you imagine if you're a student in a classroom and it happens? It just does not make you feel good at all.
The student may comply, but it won't be complying because they want to do it. It's going to be because you force them to do it. So, and that also ruins a relationship as well. When you're working with a kid, when you're making them do something they don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you intimidate them to do something. And you're right. If you're being intimidated to do something, you don't want to do it. And I'm certainly not going to want to do it for you next time.
Mm-mm. And you can get that behavior to happen quickly, but at a great cost to the relationship. Yes.
Sarcasm. That is when you say the opposite of what you mean to try to insult a person or embarrass a person because you don't like a person or you're trying to be funny. And some of our kids don't understand sarcasm. And when you use that, that can definitely not have a positive impact on building a relationship with a kid. It also can impact the peer relationships in the classroom. If a student who does not understand sarcasm and the teacher makes a sarcastic comment, then the other peers may begin to laugh at that kid. Or if the kid does understand it, then it may hurt their feelings when you may say something that is the opposite of what you really mean, and they get it and they understand that you're picking on them. So now the child becomes a joke. So I don't know your thoughts.
I agree with you, LaToya, and I think that's a good example.
Well,
criticism. If we criticize people, we're devaluing them, and it shows our disapproval. And I like this slide because it talks about different things that could be criticism. Put downs, chastising, being harsh, judgmental, and it doesn't feel good to be devalued or to be judged. And I feel like we need to build people up, not show them our disapproval.
Mm-hmm.
Guys?
So if you were to criticize a kid by saying, you better be good in the cafeteria today because every time you go to the cafeteria, you misbehave, you act out. That is criticism. And so you would want to set some expectations of how you want that student to behave before you go to the cafeteria.
I agree. And, sometimes when we're always saying to the kids, sit down, put your pencil away, put your book away, get this out, get that out. It's like, how much that just, it grates on you after a while. It's hard to maintain positivity if someone's always criticizing that you stand up, you sit down, nothing's right.
Right. You're tearing them down and not building them up. And as educators, I think our goal is to build up our students and not tear them down. Mm-hmm. So I just think of when I'm criticized and how that makes me feel if someone's critical of me. So I just put myself in the child's shoes. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well put.
Thinking about putting yourself in the child's shoes gives me this thought. I would hope that everyone would treat the students in their classroom as if they were their own children or their own nieces, nephews, grandchildren. So making threats, this is something that people do. Usually they're empty threats that are not carried through. So maybe someone would say, if you keep getting out of your seat, you're not going to go to recess. And then take the student to recess anyway. Now, I will say I don't agree with ever taking recess away from a student. I can see taking a few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes part of the recess, but threats are usually idle threats, and then the student learns that you don't always mean what you say and that you're not going to follow through, and so they don't change the behavior.
I agree. About shaping behavior, and threats do not shape behavior. It may give you may get a temporary response that you want, but in the long term, it won't shape the behavior, especially if you don't follow through.
Mm-hmm.
Using logic is when you are repeatedly saying something to a kid that they already know, and then they end up tuning you out, just like the images, your words become blah, 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 blah. So, for example, if the rule is for a student not to run down the sidewalk headed to PE, and the student runs, and then you go into, okay, you're going to run, you're going to scrape your knee, and then we're going to have to take you to the office, and we're going to call your parent, and da-da-da-da, and then your words just start becoming just blah, 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 blah to the child. The child already knows the consequence to it, so they tune you out. So I try to avoid using logic.
Mm-hmm. Good. Telling on them in front of others, it's something that I've seen occur in the schools more than once. We need to be really careful about sharing information about what the behavior is with other adults, and not, it's okay that the kid knows that somebody else knows, but to kind of berate a kid and said, you should have seen what he did in math today. I just can't believe it. So it would be very embarrassing for the student. So we definitely want to avoid that. And I just like to have a little bit about medication at this point. We need to be really careful about talking about medication, and even asking a kid, it's time to go take your medication, go see the nurse now, or go to the office now. I know there's not nurses anywhere full time. I have heard other children in classrooms telling kids, it seems like you need your medicine. So kids hear those kind of things. So we need to really think about that HIPAA law and be careful about talking about medication in front of other students.
And I know that
I agree.
it's difficult, but when you're telling on kids, like if another teacher comes in and you go, oh, guess what Lynn did today? I mean, we have our own FERPA laws, so that we should not be telling people what other kids are doing. And that also, again, makes the other kids in the class feel like, well, if you're telling on them, I can tell on them.
Mm-hmm.
LaToya, anything else?
I agree with what you both have said. When I come and do observations, sometimes, the teacher may tell on what the kid has done, and the other kids are sitting there hearing it, and then another kid will come by and say something to me about what the kid has done. So they're picking up on the behavior that you've modeled by telling on the kid. So I'm in agreement with what you're saying. Dismissing their feelings or victories. That is when you're trying to maybe one-up a kid. So if a student is having a bad day and they're like, I feel sad today. Well, think about my day. Saying something like that to a student. Or if a student made a B on a task in a subject area where they are not really strong, and you may one-up them or saying statements such as, well, you should have strived for an A. And that's not celebrating their victories, because that student probably worked very hard for that B. So we want to make sure that we are aware of our kids' feelings and emotions, and not dismiss either their feelings, if they're happy or sad. Just be mindful of that.
Taking away privileges, items of recess. And there's nothing to say that you cannot take away, but it's not really take away. Children can earn things or not earn things, and from my perspective. Taking away privileges, items of recess is something that's like really spontaneous. Like the kid comes in and accidentally hits somebody with their backpack, and you go, okay, that's it. No recess for you today. And it's just, it's not effective. Because it should be planned. If you have a plan, follow the plan. Maybe he knew that something was going to happen, maybe not, but there needs to be a behavior plan in place if you expect to want to take away privileges, items of recess. And I know Latoya and I had this conversation about if somebody earns something, you know, can you take that away? And so I want to put that back out to you and Lynn, Latoya. If somebody earns something, do you just take it away?
No, once they earn it, they've earned it. It's theirs. That's how I feel. You know, even if they have misbehaved after they've earned the reward, they did work to earn it. So, Lynn, do you have anything?
I definitely agree. So I get paid every 2 weeks, and if I did a major mess up at work, Dr. Kane would redirect me or talk to me about what I did wrong, but she certainly wouldn't deduct any of the money out of my checking account. Sometimes a kid can get on someone's last nerve. We still, I think Latoya said it earlier, we still have to stay in that adult role. And even if we're feeling mad or feeling angry at that student, we still have to treat them as your student. And so giving them the silent treatment, ignoring them, not acknowledging when they are on task and doing what they're supposed to be doing, or ignoring them when they raise their hand, that can be very hurtful for a student. And it's not going to change behavior.
Right, and that just going back and putting myself in the shoes of a student, or just as an adult myself, if someone gives me the silent treatment, that does not make me feel good. Mm-hmm. So I would never want to put that on a child, you know, have those feelings projected on a child by exhibiting that behavior towards a child. So,
mm-hmm. So basically, everything that we said today will affect the relationship. We can't build relationships if we're using these things, because they somehow hurt the child or dismiss or disapprove. They are showing signs of disapproval of somebody, and it's hard to build a relationship if someone's disapproving of you or trying to force you into doing something.
Mm-hmm. So we definitely want to work on building relationships. There's a slide here with our contact information, our email addresses. Please feel free to email us for any questions or concerns. Have a couple of resources here. Some of the things that we've done came from Glenn Latham in The Power of Positive Parenting, and Jessica Minahan in the book The Behavior Code. We hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you have any questions or concerns, please contact us.